Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Hawaii, the state of clean energy. We're back. I'm your host, Mitch Ewan. Our underwriter is the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. That's a program of the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute. I'm very pleased today to welcome back our guest. He's been on the show before, Adam Strubeck. He's a graduate research assistant with the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, and we're going to be talking story today about a new concept in agriculture, which is a form of energy called agrivoltaics, the future of farming. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back on, Mitch. Always a pleasure.
So what's the background of agrivoltaics? What was the start of this concept?
I think the start of the concept is that we're realizing that we're going to need a lot of land for producing solar energy. And it so happens that solar energy and farming both require lots of sunny, flat ground. So the idea of agrivoltaics is that we can maximize our usage of land, something that we don't have a lot of here in Hawaii, and make sure that we're getting the most out of the available farmland that we do have, and make sure that we're also producing lots of renewable energy using photovoltaics.
So the real start of this was you entered a contest, I think it was at the School of Business. Can you tell us a little bit about your contest and how well you did?
Yeah, so the contest was through the Federal Office of Technology Transitions. I was introduced to the contest through my affiliation with the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, and they were looking for innovative ideas for photovoltaic energy production. So I tried to create a design that would be conducive to agrivoltaics here in our tropical environment of Hawaii, as a lot of the agrivoltaics research is conducted on the mainland, which is a temperate ecosystem. My team did very well. We got recognized as a finalist in the solar category. So I was happy to represent both UH and the Policy Forum in this effort.
Well, congratulations. Well done. Let's flip to the first slide, the next slide. We'll talk a little bit more about conflicting land uses, because this is pretty key to the whole concept of why we're doing this. Let's talk about it because, solar installers love flat agricultural land to put their solar panels on. It's easy for them to do. They don't have to do any grading or put in any fancy foundations, but it eats up good ag land, which we need to grow our food and grow our animals. So why don't you talk a little bit about it? I think you have some data here, which is really interesting. Let's go through this slide a little bit there.
The National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL, posted this graphic, which is a visualization of the conflicting land uses between agriculture, the urban environment, and solar installations. They conducted a study called the Solar Futures Study, which estimates that we're going to produce around 45% of our energy from solar panels by the year 2050.
Wow.
However, this study estimates that we're going to need an additional 4 to 10 million acres in order to install all of this solar capacity. This is also coming at a time where, food prices are rising and we really have to prioritize locally grown agriculture. So it's really a question of how do we balance these two needs of energy and food.
Okay, well, the next slide gives us a little bit more detail about agrivoltaics. So why don't you work your way through this and explain it to our audience of how this actually works?
So agrivoltaics goes by a few different names, including agrisolar, dual-use solar, low-impact solar, and solar grazing. But basically what it is co-locating agriculture and photovoltaic panels or solar panels. So the USDA defines agrivoltaics as the use of land for both agriculture and solar photovoltaic energy. But really, agrivoltaics is expanding to become more than just what you would think of as traditional agriculture. Agrivoltaic systems can be used to produce livestock, ecosystem services, as well as habitat for pollinators, which is a really important aspect of sustainable agriculture these days.
So tell us what a pollinator is.
A pollinator would be bees, flies, moths, all different kinds of insects that allow us to produce food. And we're really relying on these species to grow all our food, but we're also cutting down their habitat at the same time. So balancing these uses between having land for agriculture, having land for pollinators, and having land for solar is what agrivoltaics is trying to reconcile.
Yeah, those pollinators are really important in the total ecosystem. If we didn't have them, we'd be all starving to death. So we need to take care of our bees. I'm not so sure about the flies, but bees are nice.
Yeah.
So you've got a couple of models on our next slide that we can work your way through.
Yes, so this is a summary graphic also produced by NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And this is produced as part of their INSPIRE research. INSPIRE stands for Innovative Solar Practices Integrated with Rural Economies and Ecosystems. Kind of a mouthful, but consolidated down, it stands INSPIRE. They produce these 5 C's to help new and existing farms that want to get into agrivoltaics. So the 5 C's are climate, configuration, crops, compatibility, and collaboration. So this is kind of a comprehensive overview of what a new farm would need to take into account if they are to get into agrivoltaics. And that's what configuration do you use? What are your underlying conditions of the climate and the piece of real estate that you're working on? What's your compatibility with the local grid? And are you off grid? Are you connected to the grid? As well as what organizations and companies you're collaborating with in order to make an agrivoltaic operation.
So let's go to the next slide, because I think the next slide has some examples. Am I correct? There
Yes.
you go.
So the top 3 panels here, crop production, animal husbandry, and ecosystem services. These would be the traditional utility scale solar configurations, which are long rows of solar panels that a lot of viewers may be familiar with. But now the research is moving towards the bottom 3 panels, which would be considered alternative configurations. And these configurations allow for more airflow, light, allow animals to pass in between solar panels, as well as allow farm equipment to operate in between the rows of solar panels. So this allows us to maximize the use of land for both agricultural production and solar voltaic production.
So if you look at the slide, the upper middle one in the upper row, you see a lot of sheep grazing under there. That's the way they also control the grass, because otherwise they'd have to put mowers in there. And the sheep make a much better mower. They get everything. And sometimes I think they eat the wires, which you have to be concerned about protecting your cables and everything else like that. But I noticed in the one down below from it, you've actually got cows grazing underneath it, which is kind of interesting as well. The one on the bottom right, I have a little bit of experience. My friend Dennis Furukawa, he went a long way down the road towards putting PV panels on greenhouses. And it was a very interesting engineering trade-off for the number of panels you could have on the greenhouse roof, because when you have a panel there, it also blocks the sun. So it's an interesting trade-off. And one of the other good things about it too is it controls the amount of water you use. So the greenhouse uses much less water than just open fields. And we're coming into a water crunch. I think we're almost there now here in Hawaii. We've got to start drilling for new water supplies. So let's talk about the potential for Hawaii.
Most of the research that's been done for agrivoltaics is focused on the mainland and temperate ecosystems, but the potential for Hawaii is what I'm trying to consider with my research. And we're thinking now that there's great potential for advancing community resilience and food security by using agrivoltaics, as well as accomplishing the mission of speeding the transition to decarbonized energy systems. And finally, sort of a bonus feature of pursuing agrivoltaics is that we can actually restore land with agroforestry systems, sort of like what we were talking about with creating habitat for pollinators. We can actually give back to the land and create a better environment while also pursuing renewable energy, something that people may not realize is possible before this research.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you can renew the forests with this multi-storied agroforestry system. I think the next slide give a little bit of a demonstration, but could you kind of walk our way through this slide to show how that might work?
Yeah, so this is a diagram of a Pacific agroforestry system. What's key to know about this system is that you can find them throughout Pacific Islands. They're very dense forests, but they're very productive. There's plants growing at different vertical levels. So there's an overstory layer, canopy layer, and then an understory and ground crop layer. So if you were to picture yourself walking around a tropical forest, you notice that there's very tall trees growing around you, but then also trees that are growing by your feet and shrubs that are all producing different yields at different layers of the forest. Not to mention that these systems are culturally significant as they often yield food, fiber, medicinal crops, flowers, seeds. And finally, these systems are carbon negative as well. So not only are we moving along this transition to decarbonize energy systems, but these systems would sequester carbon both in the soil and the plants.
And in the root structure as well. I think the root structure is one of the most important things for decarbonization. And when the tree dies or whatever, or you have a forest fire, the carbon produced goes in, but stays in the soil and is a soil enrichment substance. So that's all good. Allows microbes to grow better. Maintains water capacity, so it just doesn't flow through like it would if it was on sand. So it's really good for the soil. You have in the Amazon, they found terra preta, which way back, 2,000 years ago, they used to do burns and then leave it there. And so some of that stuff is like 10 feet underground, and now they mine it and sell it for potting soil. So now we're going to go to the secret sauce here. So let's pull up the next slide and describe your secret sauce, your little gizmo here.
Yeah, so this is the product that my partner and I, Chance Pennington, submitted for the solar competition project. We coined it as the PV tree, but really what it is an alternative configuration of agrivoltaics that would be well suited for the tropics. And it's sort of modeled after an overstory layer tree, which would likely be a palm tree in our case. So it's designed with a concrete base, metal mainframe, and then 6 solar panels that would be used to harvest solar energy while allowing light and water to percolate through down to plants that would be able to be grown underneath.
So everybody's going to wonder, how big a base do you need, because of wind loading and all that kind of stuff? Talk a little bit about the base.
So the base would be solid concrete, and there's actually different methods of sustainable concrete that people are researching now. I think some of you are even made out of agricultural materials. So for future research, we'd really want to figure out the best way to mitigate this concrete base. But the idea is that the concrete base would allow the structure to withstand up to 100-mile-an-hour winds. And to further protect against wind damage, the panels would be able to be removed in case there was like a large storm coming through.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. How would you actually remove the panels? Isn't that a big job? Or does it fold down like an umbrella?
The way we designed it would be that the panels would slide into pre-manufactured holes in the mainframe.
Oh, cool.
So it would require some labor to remove the panels. Another key function of the design is that the panels could be installed at variable heights. And this would allow you to start to grow your forest and control the amount of shade that you're really producing for the trees, because you really want to protect the trees while they're young, because normally in a forest, trees grow under larger trees. So the small young trees are growing in an environment of sort of a dappled shade environment. So this would be
coffee trees, and I'm not sure about macadamia nut trees, but they all like being in the shade, as I understand it from my friend Dave Donald.
That's right. So there are potential applications for what we'd consider high value agricultural products. Coffee and macadamia nuts are both one of these products. So I think the idea with this PV tree is that it could be marketed to individuals, communities, and even farms and ranches that wanted to grow in the tropics.
Yeah, so these high value crops, that's what I think, we had Dave Donald on here about 5 or 6 months ago to talk about his coffee. And it was unbelievable. Like if you have this designer coffee or specialty coffee, they can get about $4,000 a pound, which is unbelievable amount. I mean, on the preppies, in San Francisco, and all they'll pay $70 for a little demi-tass of coffee. The real coffee lovers. And of course, they're trying to get all the various tastes and all that kind of stuff. It's a really interesting market. So also, cacao. I mean, there's a cacao farm up in the North Shore. I went up there with my friend Dennis and check that out. There's another high value agricultural product, and they actually process it in Kailua, and they have a really nice little chocolate factory there, right here on the North Shore. So moving on, you talked about growing with the forest. So let's talk a little bit more about agrivoltaics in Hawaii.
Yeah. So the idea behind our business model is that in order for there to be a robust agrivoltaic industry in Hawaii, there would need to be planning that goes into the agrivoltaic systems, but also planning in terms of resilience for communities, as a lot of communities or agricultural operations that are off grid would not only require the solar trees, but robust battery systems to be able to handle their electrical needs in terms of processing agricultural products or being able to power their equipment when they're not able to connect to the traditional electrical grid.
So let's look at the next slide, because we have an example of an electric tractor, which was featured on Dave Donald's show by Select Track. I think when we did our show, there were only two in Hawaii, one on the North Shore. I think Jack Johnson had one, and then Dave bought one. And he does everything with that thing. So that would be ideal to be able to charge his tractor, when he stops, if he's in the agrivoltaic forest, as it were. He could plug in his tractor and run all his stuff and keep his charge up as he goes through his daily chores. And he runs everything from that tractor. Like, he has a power takeoff unit, so he has sprayers and fertilizer distributors. It's amazing what these tractors do. They're just like a horse with multiple applications on them.
And I think as a further iteration of the solar tree design, there would actually be a battery that could be incorporated perhaps into the base or somewhere close by, so that a solar tree could be located in a field, and then the solar tractor could just pull up to the tree and get a quick charge versus having to travel back all the way to wherever the main base for that tractor is. So you'd actually be able to expand the area that you're able to use your tractor. So that's some further idea that we're exploring with the PV tree design.
Just a rush of, to the brain. I was thinking, you could also power LED lights. They use LED lights of different frequencies. I know for growing marijuana, they do. And different plants react to different wavelengths of light depending on their growing cycle. So that would be really good for growing high-value agricultural crops if you could, feed a whole string of photovoltaic lights with your photovoltaic system. That'd be awesome.
That's right. And there's another emerging technology within the solar field, and that's controlling what wavelengths of light they're letting to pass through the solar panels, so semi-transparent solar panels. So potentially you'd be able to let certain wavelengths of light pass through your solar panels and go to the plants below. So that would allow you to have a way to further control the conditions of the plants that you're growing.
So I want to talk a little bit about policy, because we are the policy forum here. And so let's talk a little bit about ag use, permitting, and then what kind of policies do we need to help this along here in Hawaii?
Well, right now the state has an important agricultural land designation. So that's basically classifying what agricultural lands are very important to our economic development. So we may not want to put agrivoltaics on those lands because it would be limiting our production there. But on all the other lands that are still used for agriculture, I think there's a large potential for agrivoltaic production, because maybe you'd have to sacrifice a small amount of crop, but that would be made up for by the amount of PV energy that you're producing. Right. So I think the policy that's needed is to identify which lands would be viable for agrivoltaics and then provide incentives for farmers to be able to incorporate these kinds of systems.
So, similar incentives to what people, rooftop solar and all that kind of stuff. Is that what we're talking about?
I think so, as well as financing assistance. These installing solar panels is never the cheapest thing to do. So in order for farmers to feel comfortable taking the leap to install these systems, they need both technical assistance and financing assistance.
Are there any of these systems currently in Hawaii now that you know of?
I do know of several on the island of Oahu. I believe there's a sheep agrivoltaic system. And actually, a funny story about that is I read that they initially tried to use goats, but the goats were standing on top of the solar panels and also chewing on the wires of the system. So that just goes to show that not every alternative configuration works as well as the others. So you really have to dial in which crops and which animals you want to use.
Yeah, I think Hawaii Gas had quite a large PV array up on the North Shore, up by Kinea, the town Mililani up there, and they were putting sheep down there to graze. So it was a pretty big operation, as I recall. So what else can we talk about? We've got about 5 minutes left, I think. So what's top of mind for you now? What are your next steps? And do you want to make an actual business out of this? Like, I was talking to the Office of Technology Transfer, and they have all sorts of programs there now at the university for, budding entrepreneurs, make entrepreneurs grow. So are you planning to take this to the next step and put all this good work to use?
Well, right now I'm focusing on finishing my degree, but certainly keeping this idea and this presentation in my back pocket, as a potential business to explore after graduation. I am passionate about the transition to decarbonized energy systems, and I certainly feel that agrivoltaics plays a large part in that, especially here in Hawaii. Not to mention that we were talking about these high-value agricultural products. The key part of that would be a rising tide lifts all ships. So if we're able to grow more of these high-value agricultural products, that would be able to diversify our economy away from tourism and just bring more dollars into the state overall.
Well, I'd like to show the last slide because it's a really nice view of what this thing might, a bird's eye view. So why don't you just go through that a little bit? We have a little bit of time, so we're not in a rush to finish this anytime soon. So tell us what we're seeing here now.
Yeah, so this was a visualization of a small scale, energy agroforest or imagined energy agroforest. We calculated that with 3 solar trees, which would be 18 panels, 18 300-watt solar panels, that would be able to provide the energy that you would need for a medium-sized household here in Hawaii. So I think this could be like a backyard or even small community system that could be employed. I think the next step in, this idea as a business would be a proof of concept. So I think if you were able to create maybe like a community garden, or if you had an individual that wanted to install this in your backyard, that would be the next step towards this as a proof of concept and viable business strategy.
Yeah, that might be a nice option that people could add to their backyard so they can grow their own food, most people, not most people, but people who do have backyards. And it also provides shade so the kids can run around without getting sunburned. And so you can actually put your property to use. It's kind of like dual or triple use.
Yeah, and as one final note, I think that there's kind of an unexplored potential in remote island communities for agrivoltaics. There's a lot of talk about using agrivoltaics for utility scale PV systems. But I think there's a lot of unexplored applications for emergency preparedness and response. Having redundant systems that are able to provide energy in case of emergency, or if you lose connection to the main power grid.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're going to wrap it up now. If they want to get in contact with you, how do they do that? I think we have your email address on that last slide.
I'm located within the Department of Urban and Regional Planning here at UH Mānoa. As well as serving as a graduate assistant for the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. If anyone's interested, feel free to send me an email.
Yeah. If we have any investors out there that like this idea, maybe go to one of these accelerator things and develop your business plan more and launch it. And like I said, the university's got some very interesting supporting programs now where they actually have money available for young budding entrepreneurs like potentially yourself. So it's been fascinating listening to this. It's a great idea, Adam, and congratulations on your being one of the finalists in the contest. That's really great, and it's a really nice idea. So this is Mitch Ewan. We're going to leave it there now. You've been listening to Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, and we've been talking to Adam Strubeck, graduate assistant with the Energy Policy Forum, our alma mater. And we've been talking a story about a new concept in agriculture that combines agriculture with photovoltaics called Agrivoltaics. So thank you, Adam, for sharing this concept with us.
Thank you for having me on, Mitch. Appreciate it.
And thanks to our viewers for tuning in. I'm Mitch Ewan. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another great episode of Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. Aloha, everyone.
Thank you so much for watching Think Tech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.